In the editorial, The Invisible Victims of Hashtag MeToo, author Valerie Morales highlights the supreme lack of equality of the hashtag MeToo movement. The movement's goals is meant to be visibility of the rampant sexual assault and harassment in today's society, yet many fall through the cracks. Morales dubs these girls as the Invisibles, simply not rich enough, not white enough, not enough to be noticed by the rest of society, despite being the major recipients of sexual violence. Morales opens this article with an anecdote. The anecdote is about her neighbor, 15-year-old neighbor, who was raped by her father after she caught her father having sex with another woman. This anecdote is meant to horrify us. It's supposed to bring us closer to the issue. In the anecdote, Morales uses what is called an amplification here, where she says, interrupted her father having sex with another woman who was not her mother. This is an amplification, this is a literary device that is used to draw out the sentence and exaggerate it, and it cements the issue that her father was an immoral person. She also uses an example of imagery here where she said that Daphne was frozen against the wall, staring at the door she had just entered, shamed and humiliated. And again, this brings emotional attachment to the issue. In the next paragraph, Morales uses an irony and allusion to the dramatization of Hollywood versus everyday life, where she says, the Daphne who walked through that door wasn't a character created to fulfill a story arc in a violent movie where the hero saves her at the end. And this is an allusion to the dramatization of Hollywood, but it's also ironic because the article deals with Hollywood obscuring everyday sexual assault situations. Finally, she ends this anecdote with an assertion: no one was going to save her. And this is a short, powerful sentence, and it's a tendency by the author to end important paragraphs with these powerful statements or assertions. The next part of this article talks about the Daphnes of the world, and calling them the Daphnes is an example of a synodoche, which uses a part to refer to the whole. The Daphnes, which is using a proper noun from the anecdote above to refer to a larger group, is referring to the people who are sexually assaulted but their stories aren't heard. Next, the author uses what is an example of parallelism. Not white enough, not wealthy enough, not pretty enough, just not enough, is what she says. And this is an example of parallelism because it emphasizes the author's purpose and exposes the hidden victims of Me Too. And because of the repetitive sentence structure, it's an example of parallelism. She also ends it in a truncated sentence, just not enough, which emphasizes the lack of visibility on these issues and is also a stylistic choice. Moving on, Morales uses a second anecdote here. And in this anecdote, she talks about Tamara Burke, an activist who started the Me Too movement and also worked at a youth camp and met a girl named Heaven, who was a sexual assault survivor. And Burke never told Heaven that she too was a sexual assault survivor, but she wished she had, and that is why she started the hashtag Me Too movement. And this is, again, a part of the author's purpose. And in this anecdote, she uses a tricolon, which is here, where she says me too, me too, me too 3 times. And this explains the name of the movement, hashtag Me Too, and also emphasizes Tamara's inner conflict over whether to tell Heaven about her sexual assault story. Morales then talks about the Hollywood's interpretation on the hashtag Me Too movement. And in this paragraph, she uses a imagery, which is also a metaphor, where she says, taking an axe to the door. This is imagery because it evokes a picture in your mind of someone violently or brutally breaking in somewhere. But it also is a metaphor for Hollywood's sudden and forceful reaction to the hashtag Me Too movement. She then uses another example of parallelism in tricolon here, where she says, stories were shared, names were spoken, trauma was revealed. And these are 3 short sentences with the exact same grammatical structure, and they emphasize what Hollywood did for the hashtag Me Too movement before they began to take away from the movement. Finally, she uses an example of poly polysyndeton, and that is here where she said gender and power and male toxicity. And she says gender and which is an example of polysyndeton, and it also compounds the issues that the hashtag Me Too movement took on. Um, but solidarity with whom? Says Morales. And here is an example of Hypophora, where she questions the true motives of the hashtag Me Too movement. And it also goes back to the author's purpose, which was that the new movement ignored the original victims and only supported the elite. She answers her own question in this next section here, and where she explains her purpose and also explains the answers to her hypothetical question above. Finally, she ends this paragraph here, with another assertion: all silence isn't the same. And this assertion is, again, the author's tendency to end sentences end paragraphs with a powerful statement. Morales continues with a third and final anecdote. And this anecdote is about a woman who lived with the author named Ami, who was a rape victim and died from a failed abortion. Now, the author never knew about Ami. She kept silent, and this is because her mother's never told her, because certain things you don't talk about. And that is the hashtag MeToo's original purpose, was to reveal these things that people just don't talk about or aren't very obvious in the media. Next, the author uses what is probably her most powerful example of polysyndeton here, where she says the survivors in Hollywood become heroes, while the black girls of Compton and the black girls living in the West End of Atlanta and the black girls in Hyde Park in Chicago and the black girls in the Queensbridge housing project in New York City and the black girls in Allegheny West in Philadelphia and in Cherry Hill in Baltimore and the Lower Ninth Ward in New Orleans are faceless and nameless. This is an example of polysyndeton because of the repeated and. And it's the most powerful example is because it emphasizes all of those who go unnoticed and unavenged by the new Me Too movement and how they are obscured by the elite society. And the end of that paragraph with the polysyndeton, she also emphasizes her point one more time, where she says the hashtag MeToo originals have become the hashtag MeToo props and the hashtag MeToo ghosts. And this perfectly sums up the purpose of this article. Next, the author uses imagery here, where she says, her words felt as if someone had just taken a mirror and angled the glass towards the sun, generating a bright heat in the way only truth can. This is imagery because it's giving the words and action a feel, and it's giving the idea of truth a feeling, a bright heat, a mirror, and angled the glass. These are all things that you can picture. And it's all referring to this quote by James Fonda, which says, so many of the women that were assaulted by Harvey Weinstein are famous and white, and everybody knows them. This has been going on a long time to Black women and other women of color. And again, this brings up the author's purpose of this article. The author makes another use of polysyndeton here, where she says, but the faces of hashtag MeToo are actresses like Alyssa Milano and Rose McGowan, and the multiplicity of Weinstein accusers, most of whom are white. And this is listing actors, the white elite actors with legitimate causes, but that are not the only victims of sexual assault. She talks more about the the obscurity of the people of color and the victims of color. And then here she makes a allusion saying there is hashtag MeToo adult table and the hashtag MeToo kids table. And this is an interesting allusion because it's referring to the adult, kid, and adult tables at big family dinners such as Thanksgiving. And it's kind of grouping all the victims together in one family of sorts, but some seem more important than others. And those at the adult table are the ones who get the most recognition, they get the most sympathy, they get the most support. who get the most sympathy, who get the most support, who get the most following, and who get to tell their stories. Whereas the ones at the kids' table are overlooked, they're abandoned, they get socially neglected. Finally, she sums up her point in this last paragraph and makes one final allusion here where she says, the movement has fallen into the predictable patterns of exclusion and omission, of separate but equal nonsense, as it favors one type of survivor and re traumatizes and neglects the other. The of separate but equal nonsense is an allusion to previous Supreme Court cases dealing with segregation in schools. And this shows that this is just another iteration of racial segregation, and that the hashtag MeToo movement is playing favorites and showing a somewhat racist side. In conclusion, author Valerie Morales uses multiple stylistic and literary devices to assert her point that the hashtag MeToo movement has been rendered useless for those who aren't the rich white elite, that it obscures the everyday victims of sexual assault, and, most importantly, that this new variation of the movement is drastically different from its original purpose. The author proves this point through anecdotal storytelling and allusions, emphasis in the form of polysyndeton and or assertions, and quotes from outside sources that she punctuates with imagery and metaphor.